Images of broken Spider-Folk have danced before a million eyes and called us all across the Spider-Verse. And it seems like something is going to change all worlds. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse has so many Easter eggs that it might be why the price of eggs went up. That was a pretty bad joke, I'm sorry. Anyways, let's get into it. Spoilers ahead. That's not an exaggeration, by the way. There was enough stuffed into this movie to fill months worth of Easter eggs. Even if we were to go frame by frame by frame in this 2-hour and 20-minute epic, we'd have to go back and add stuff that was missed. This is only the beginning. So let's get the big reveals out of the way right off the bat. Starting with the one that we knew a little bit about. In the trailers, we saw Miguel O'Hara drop a reference to Doctor Strange and his little nerd in Earth 19999. While we knew that line was coming from the trailers, what we didn't know was that it wasn't a throwaway. Earth 19999 has always been a bit of an unofficial official designation for the MCU, and when the MCU itself went reality hopping, it christened itself with the main Marvel Universe's 616. The movie visited so many variations of Spider-Man dating all the way back to the 1967 animated show, that it's easier to just name versions of Spider-Man that didn't make an appearance. Sorry, Nicholas Hammond of the 70s live-action TV show, you were left out once again. This implies that each medium is an actual depiction of another universe. Think of it in terms of the "we live in a simulation" argument. Only instead of us living in a simulation, we're just another medium for a story being told across realities. Which is like, totally far out, man. Donald Glover is perhaps the one person most associated with Miles Morales, including influencing the character's very existence. A cheeky social media campaign to get the actor, comedian, musician, writer cast as Peter Parker ended up with Miles Morales co-creator Brian Michael Bendis basing his look on Glover in Spider-Man's PJs from the Anthropology 101 episode of Community. This has led to the actor portraying Aaron Davis, Miles' uncle and eventual villain, the Prowler, in Spider-Man Homecoming. While Glover's Davis was not yet the Prowler proper, he was referenced as such in a little on-screen graphic, he was clearly up to no good as he was buying black market Chitauri gear from Toombs' gang. Apparently that's landed him in some cross-verse shenanigans, because the actor appeared in live action in O'Hara's holding facility waiting to be sent back to his own reality. As a cameo, it raised more questions than it answered. Since live action and animated universes were both plentiful, it could mean that the MCU's Aaron Davis was in the wrong universe as an anomaly. Perhaps Sony's cinematic live action Spider-Verse that currently lacks a Spider-Man. That universe, labeled 688, made its own appearance as Spot found Venom's Mrs. Chen rather unflappable, seeing as she's Venom's chocolate connection. Either that or the MCU Aaron Davis got in some trouble with said Chitauri tech. Or it was just meant as another Aaron Davis entirely who was in the movie as part of a fire hose of references and nods to fans. Time will tell. Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire being in No Way Home turned out to be the worst kept secret in the world despite Garfield's best efforts. Well, Across the Spider-Verse got in on the action, notably when O'Hara was telling Miles that part of being Spider-Man was tragedy. Like a proper bit of exposition in a modern genre film that included a multimedia display. This time it was in the form of clip montages of the notable tragedies in the various adaptations of Spider-Man, including McGuire's Peter Parker crying over Uncle Ben, and Garfield having a bad time next to a fallen Captain Stacy. Through look, feel, tone, and visual references, Across the Spider-Verse did not shy away from the comic book origins of Spider-Man, but rather embraced the form in a giant bear hug of tributes and nods. To signal the intent, right at the beginning of the movie, the stamp of the comic book code was shown. Just like movies before them, comic books as a commercial art were under threat of censorship after popular horror comic books became the center of a moral panic. Comic books headed off the same way movies did with the Hays Code. They set up a code for comic books to follow that assured they weren't corrupting the morals of minors. Just like the Hays Code, the comic book code prevented more serious stories from being told. It was a Spider-Man comic that first ran without the Comic Code Authority stamp of approval with an anti-drug issue of Spider-Man. Whatever your number one for the best live-action superhero movie is, chances are Spider-Man 2 is at least a contender. As a nod to Spider-Man 2 and its standout villain, aspiring main villain Spot echoed Octavius's "the power of the sun in the palm of my hand," when he realized he now had access to the multiverse with "the power of the multiverse in the palm of my hand." Seriously, how good was Spider-Man 2? When Gwen escapes to Miles' reality, she kicks up a lot of comic books, including one with the cover of Amazing Fantasy number 15. the first appearance of Spider-Man. I wonder if that comic is as valuable in a world with an actual Spider-Man as it is in ours. Probably could pay for Miles' college. In 2011, a near mint copy sold for $1.1 million. I really need to get better at preserving my comics. Even if you've never been to New York City, there's at least one thing that you probably know about the Big Apple. Driving there is a sucker's game. It's the home of the paradox that no one drives in New York because the roads are too congested with cars. The whole no one drives in New York thing gets a shout out when Miles points out that his mom doesn't have a driver's license either. Spider-Man has an easier way of getting around town, of course, which makes the Human Torch's gift to Spider-Man all the more confusing. Even Spider-Man thought so as he was approached by the Dune buggy's builder, Corona Motors, about making the car for him to promote their clean air engine. With Johnny Storm's help, Spider-Man eventually relented. The buggy made a prominent appearance in the all-hands-on-deck chase of Miles on his way to the go-home machine. It's pretty silly, but it was cool to see. There are a few non-Spider-Man references thrown in here and there, like the ones revolving around the punk rock anti-establishment Spider-Man, Spider-Punk. The Spider-Verse movies have established a convention for introducing the various Spider-Folk and their origins, where they give a quick narration of how they became their reality's one and only Spider-Man, accompanied, as all things in the series, by eye-popping graphic design. To pump up Spider-Punk's punk rock cred, his origin story included some fonts that would be familiar to fans of the punk rock scene stretching from the 70s to the 90s, including nods to album covers by bands like Rancid, Minor Threat, and NoFX, among others. One of the biggest standouts from the first Spider-Verse movie was the breathtaking leap of faith sequence, where a falling Spider-Man was inverted to appear like he was rising. There were numerous nods to this inversion throughout the movie, including the upside-down heart-to-heart with a similar leap, including shattering the surface being launched off during the climax. There were a number of voice cameos throughout the movie, but perhaps the best one was Adam Sandberg voicing Ben Reilly, the Scarlet Spider. Not because of any connection that Sandberg has, but because of the touch of fun they had in his portrayal. Ben Reilly is the genetic clone of Peter Parker created by the Jackal who thought he was the real Peter Parker for a little bit. To underline how being a Spider-Man means your life is littered with tragedy, the Spider-Man who was literally a copy of the original struggles to blaze his own path, and instead of having people he loves die, he himself keeps dying and being resurrected via cloning, usually in an attempt at redemption that is undone by his revival. The Comics Code Authority stamp wasn't the only nod to comic book conventions, of course. It was actually one of many. While there's a lot to track down during every frame of the movie, some of them went by too quick to catch. But Across the Spider-Verse borrowed a convention from comic books to fill readers in on references to stories they might not have seen. If a character made a reference to something that happened in another issue, a little yellow box would be in the corner of the panel from the editor, meant to catch the reader up. Something Across the Spider-Verse used to clarify some of the references strung throughout the movie. It might not seem like it on the surface, but punk rock owes a great deal of what it is to reggae music. First wave punk rock pioneers drew heavily from the reggae records in their personal collections, including focusing punk rock's angry energy into songs of political and social commentary. This is echoed a bit in the look for Spider-Punk. There was a more tenuous connection though. The shop owner, who is being robbed by Spot in the beginning, is voiced by Ziggy Marley, son of reggae legend Bob Marley. The way you can tell you're in the wrong universe and Across the Spider-Verse is that you start glitching out, as the universe rejects a thing that shouldn't be there. O'Hara's team of Multiverse repair Spider-Folk get around this with a thing we're assured is much cooler than a watch, that stabilizes them as well as allowing them to open portals to other realities. Poor old Wanda had to do it the hard way. During the opening sequence, the various production logos themselves glitched, showing older or alternate versions. One of the things that will come up when we're able to go frame by frame and Across the Spider-Verse is adding up all the variations of Spider-Man that made it to the screen. Trust me, we are 100% doing that video. Personally, I'm going to be looking for the what-if version of Spider-Man where the spider instead bit Aunt May and she became Spider-Man. So far, I haven't spotted her, but I have like 100 more viewings to do, so you know, it'll happen. I'm sure she's in there. One that we saw all the way back in the trailer though is the one dubbed the Bombastic Bag-man. Not an alternate reality Spider-Man in the comics, it was Spider-Man who was left without a suit after Reed Richards helped Parker separate from the Venom symbiote. Parker was then lent a spare Fantastic Four uniform with a paper bag acting as the mask. He's in there among the many versions that pursue Miles. The Spider-Man villain Superman has been #1 on Sony's wish list since they acquired the property in the first place. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was the closest that we got to a blatant Sinister Six. Alas, it was not to be, as Garfield gave way to Holland and the MCU's Spider-Man was born. No Way Home did get close, but technically not the Sinister Six. In Across the Spider-Verse, they got even closer, when Miles lands in a reality without a Spider-Man, where the TV name drops the group on a news report. Look, this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to details tucked away in that movie. By the time they're all cataloged, going through them is going to last longer than the movie itself. All the more reason to double and triple dip. You're sure to catch something new. Now, if you'll excuse me, I gotta go watch it again.